So we're going to play this video. I'm talking about prosperity. And then at the end of the program, I'll come on and share with you again about how you can receive all of these products. Okay, according to my records, I was looking at this morning, and I started teaching on prosperity out of Luke chapter 16. But according to my records, I actually just mentioned the first few verses, and then I started with Luke chapter 16, verses 9, where Jesus gave the interpretation of this parable. And then we spent quite a bit of time on that and went over to Mark chapter 10 and talked about the rich young ruler and the Lord saying that if you trust in riches, it's hard for you to enter into the kingdom of God. But according to my records, I didn't really explain the first few verses of Luke chapter 16, the parable that Jesus used to make these points. So I want to go back and look at this, because this is something that to me is one of the keys of prosperity. Instead of looking at finances and everything that you have as being your own, you need to get this attitude of being a steward. And so this parable in Luke chapter 16, verse 1, it says, he says unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. So this parable is about a man who was a steward. And steward is a word that we don't use a lot today, but what it's talking about is a person who manages the financial affairs of another person, is what a steward is. And the reason that this man was in trouble and was going to be fired was because it wasn't his money. It wasn't his choice to do with that money whatever he wanted to do. He was a steward. And to me, this is one of the keys of prosperity, is that you start recognizing that everything that you have comes from God. It's not yours. And the reason people struggle with tithing and giving when the Lord tells them to is because they look at this as this is my money. It's really not yours. And I know that outside of the gospel, outside of the Word of God, people would say, oh, yes, it is. I worked for this. This is a product of my sweat, my effort, all of these things that I did. But if you would really look at things the way that God looks at things, He's the one that gave you your talents and abilities, your health. He's the one that caused all of the things that have happened in this nation to cause us to prosper like no other nation has ever prospered. This isn't just a coincidence. I remember the very first time I went to India back, I think it was 1980. And I went into a millionaire's home. And this guy was so proud of his home, and yet the thing was dirty. It wasn't painted. His plates had chips on them and things like this. And I grew up better off than a guy who was a millionaire and very well off in India. And I just realized over there, I went into some really remote places and saw extreme poverty, and I realized that I didn't do anything to make that happen. You know what? There are people over the last few hundred years have fought and died and have given their life to produce this prosperity. And it was God inspired. Contrary to what you will hear today, America was founded by godly people. It was founded for godly principles. It was freedom of religion and freedom from tyranny. And people have given their lives for this. You didn't make that happen. This is a gift from God. And this is one reason that we make our students go on a second-year missions trip. I just had someone telling me yesterday, Daniel Bennett, and you know, he grew up in Chile, and he's been in a lot of different places. And he was saying that that's one of the things about the Bible college that he loves the most, is that Americans just think that this is normal. You know, the way that we live, the prosperity that we have. And if you don't go to some other places, it'll give you a different perspective. We've taken our students, I remember going to Mexico and going out and ministering to people who were born and lived for 40 and 50 years on a dump. They were born in a cardboard box. They still lived in a cardboard box in their 40s, never got off of the dump, ate the trash that was dumped there. And I mean, this was a huge dump. That's the way that a lot of people live. I've heard a statistic before that if you have $10 to your name that you can spend, you are richer than 90% of the world's population. And yet Americans think that, well, man, I only have 4 flat screen TVs. I don't have the newest iPhone that has all of the bells and whistles on it, and I'm poor. You need to recognize that, man, we are blessed, 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 and you didn't do anything to make this happen. It's God that has prospered you. It's God that over thousands of years people have been struggling. And man, America is, we have come from being the smallest nation. I mean, a bunch of farmers overcame the mightiest nation that has ever dominated this earth, Britain. It conquered most of the earth. It's the largest empire ever, and a bunch of farmers overcame them. It wasn't a coincidence. It was God. God is the one who's caused all this. The point I'm trying to get across is that you need to see that the prosperity that you have, it's not yours. God is the one who has blessed us. There are millions of people around this world that they would love to have your problems. They would love to have an old car that doesn't smell new. Did you know you can go buy stuff in a can and spray in your car and make it smell new? And yet we get upset because we don't have the newest this and all of this, and we get to thinking that we're poor. You need to recognize God is the one who's blessed us, and God is the one who gave you all of your talents and abilities. You can develop what God has given you. You can hone it and make it so that it's better, but you can't put in what God left out. And did you know, if you have an ability to work, if you've got the health so that you can go work, God's the one that gave you that health. If you can think properly so that you can function, did you know God's the one who gave that to you? All God has had to do is just stir the chemicals in your brain just a little bit, and you could, lick your stamps off the drool coming off your chin. You aren't the one that caused your health. You aren't the one that gave you your mind. You can develop it and you can educate it, but you know what? Whether you realize it or not, God is your source. God is the one who gave you everything that you have. And it is wrong, wrong, wrong for you to say, this is my money. God's the one who gave you. It says in Deuteronomy 8:18, it says, you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He that gives you power to get wealth, that He may establish His covenant as He sware unto your fathers as it is this day. God's the one who gave you the power to get wealth. He doesn't give you wealth. And this is another thing that people really mess up on. Oh, God, give me this. God doesn't give you money. God doesn't have money. They don't have money in heaven. God doesn't have money. He's not going to give you money. He gives you power to get wealth. He gives you health. He gives you an ability. He gave you a mind. It's God who gives you the power to get wealth. So whether you realize it or not, you are a steward. And this man, the reason he was in trouble is because he wasn't acting like a steward. He acted like this was his money. And he took the money of his master and he was using it for selfish things. And so look at this. It goes on to say in verse 2, and he called him, talking about the master, called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. The way we would say to this today is, he says, get your books in order. I'm going to look at your books, and if the report that I've heard about you is true, I'm going to fire you. And in verse 3, then said the steward within himself, what shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig to beg. I'm ashamed. This is amazing to me. This guy wasn't ashamed to steal, but he was ashamed to beg. And he says, I can't dig. I guarantee you this guy could have dug. He just didn't want to. This was below his dignity. Now, stealing money wasn't below his dignity, but, digging and begging was below his dignity. And this is also basically an admission of guilt. Because if he'd have been innocent, he'd have said, well, man, I'll be glad to show you the books. But no, he knew he was wrong. He knew he had been stealing. And so this is in his admission of guilt. He says, man, he's going to take away from me the stewardship. And notice that he hadn't saved any of the money that he had been stealing from his master. Now, this is a key to understanding this parable, because if he had stolen this money and then hid it someplace or invested it and stuff, well, then when he got fired, he'd have money to rely on. But he says, man, I'm going to be out on the street. In other words, he'd been stealing money and just blowing it on stuff. Man, this is rampant in our world today.
Andrew will be right back after these messages.
Did you know that we have over 200,000 hours of free material on our website? I mean, if you were to watch every single day for 8 hours a day, it would take you over 22 years to go through all of that, and it's free. We do have some things for sale, but we have a great website. I encourage you to check it out, awmi.net. We've got television programs, radio programs, we've got videos, we've got teaching, we've got books on there, just all kinds of things. Check it out, awmi.net.
And now, here's Andrew.
People think that prosperity is so that I can go skiing every weekend. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of these things in their place. But I'm saying if you are wanting money and you have to have it so that you can indulge all of your hobbies, so that you can get the fanciest phone, so that you can have, all of these little trinkets and things that people want, and we just get to thinking that these things, I owe it to myself. I saw a commercial on the television about some beauty aid. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, it comes on at the end. It says, because I deserve it. And I thought, you don't deserve anything, you selfish person. We think that we deserve all of these things, and we think it's our right, and we get upset if we can't have the brand new this and the brand new that and stuff. We've got this thing of entitlement where we think everybody owes me something. And this is what communism, Marxism, socialism is all about, is let's go to the rich. These people, it's not right for them to have so much money. They need to take it and share it with me. And that's wrong. God rewards hard labor. And there's people that have done things and they've made a living, and there's nothing wrong with them having billions and billions of dollars. Now, if they are godly people, it would be to their advantage to share it with other people and stuff. But for you to go and take it from them, that's a communist idea. Did you know that the Lord took these talents and gave them to the people? And the one who, let's see, I may be getting these stories mixed up. I think it's about the laborers that went out and worked, and he agreed to pay everybody a penny a day. And then he went out at 9 o'clock, and there were some people that hadn't been hired, and he says, go into the field, I'll pay you whatever it's worth. Then at 12 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock, and finally just 1 hour before it was time to quit, he told some people to go into my fields and I'll pay you whatever's right. And then he started with the people who had only worked for 1 hour, and he gave them a penny, a day's wage. And so the people who had worked all day long thought, well, then I deserve more. And they got upset at the master, and he says, look, I gave you what you had agreed to. It's my money, I can give to other people. But see, communists come along, no, everybody's got to be the same. Parity. That's wrong. There are some people that do things differently, and you reward them differently. And a person can do with his money what he wants to do. But this is a communist idea that everybody deserves to get the same thing. That is not good. Did you know that the Pilgrims, when they came here, they started with socialism? I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but the very first year there was 120 of the Pilgrims that landed there in Plymouth. And anyway, they were going to have all things common, and over half the people died the very first year. Out of 120, I think there was 61 that died, or maybe it was 51. Anyway, it was close. Half the people died, and part of it was because the people who were old and infirm and couldn't work, the young people that could do things had to go work and then share all of their food and all of their effort with everybody else, and it took away incentive. And so Bradford, the governor of that group, the second year decided we aren't going to do this anymore. We're giving everybody their own plot of land, and we're letting them work. And did you know they began to flourish when they started rewarding individual things, and they got rid of that socialist system, and it killed a bunch of them. There was, of course, disease and other things at work, but that was a big part of it, and they got away from that. I tell you, socialism and everybody, health care, that we want universal health care, that's a demonic type thing. Somebody says, how could that be wrong? Did you know that every system that has national health care, their health care is worse than ours? And I'm not saying that ours couldn't be improved and stuff, but I guarantee we have the best health care system in the world because it allows people to prosper and to do things. But I've got people, employees in England, and I had one employee that waited for 2.5 years to get a gallbladder surgery because that wasn't a life-threatening thing and it was low on the list, and she waited for 2.5 years. Finally, she had to go and pay for it privately because they just wouldn't do it. And I've never been to England that if you look at the papers that you'll see stories about somebody that had some terminal disease, some young child or something, and there was very small chance of the operation working, and so they don't even perform it because they just let people die because after all, there's a small chance of it working. They determine who gets what and how it works. I had one of my board of directors, I went and visited him in the hospital, and you wouldn't have stayed in the place that he was in, healthcare. And every time they change location, you have to go stand in line for 8 to 10 hours to sign up for a new thing. It's not good. Government doesn't do anything as well as private sector can do. Anyway, that's kind of a separate issue, but this guy is just sitting here admitting that he's guilty and I don't want to work and I can't do this. He wanted to steal money from other people. Did you know that socialism is stealing? You take people who do good and give it to people who are lazy and won't do anything. That's wrong. The scripture says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, that if you don't work, don't eat. And yet in our system, we reward. We've got people that are second and third generation welfare people, and we're giving money to people who won't work. There is a place for benevolence giving. Anybody can be in trouble, and for a brief period of time, they can need help. And so there's nothing wrong with helping people and doing things, but to reward laziness, second and third generation welfare people is an ungodly concept, and we've got a lot of people in this nation that just feel entitled, that everybody should be giving to me. We ought to go tax these rich people and take the money from them and give it to poor people who are lazy and won't work and won't do anything. That's an ungodly concept. I got back on that again, but so in verse 4 he says, I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his Lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, How much owest thou unto my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, Take thy bill and sit down quickly and write 50. And then he called the next one. And it says he called every one of his Lord's debtors. So I don't think that there was only 2 debtors for this rich man. This was just samples. In other words, he discounted some people's bill 50%, some people 20%. And the logic behind all of this was that when he got kicked out of the stewardship because he was guilty, he took this money and used it to bribe people, is what he was doing. And so when he got kicked out of the stewardship, he'd go knock on their door and he says, Do you remember I discounted your bill 50%? I'm out on the street. Could you help me? Could you give me some food? Could I stay with you for a while? He was bribing people with this money. So he was still stealing money from his master. But instead of putting it in his pocket, instead of blowing it on stuff, he started investing it in changing people's opinion about him, buying their favor so that when he would be kicked out of the stewardship, he could go mooch off of them for a while. So he was still stealing. He was still doing wrong. But for the first time, he was using the money that he had control over to think about the future and to affect people's opinion about him. Praise God. I tell you, these truths about prosperity are just awesome. God has used this to totally change my life. You know, He put a call on my life 57 years ago. But for about 30 years, I just struggled. I was financially strapped and I was frustrated. And God gave me a revelation on prosperity in 1996. And of course, I've been growing in it since then. But it changed everything. My life has totally changed. I would not be able to be on television if it wasn't for these truths. Did you know I spend over $2 million a month on television airtime. And then we have all kinds of other things going on. I couldn't do this. If you've ever watched this program, if you've ever been blessed, if God has ever spoken anything to you, it's because of these truths that I'm sharing right here. And I tell you, this isn't just unique for me. God has a special plan for every single person watching this program, but it takes money for you to get that accomplished. You need to learn these truths. So Friday is going to be my last day to offer this new product on these chapels that we're teaching on prosperity. And then I have this product that I've had out for over a decade about financial stewardship. We're asking for a donation of any amount for that. If you could not or would not send anything, we'll send you this little booklet entitled Financial Stewardship. And then I have a USB that will have the audio and the video from those previous teachings on prosperity from years ago. So you've got the more complete teaching right here, and then you have these chapel services in this new product. This is a USB that will have the video and the audio on there. Listen to our announcer as he gives you this information, and then please call or write today.
To get the teaching on today's program, call our helpline, visit our website, or scan the QR code on the screen.
Hello, this is Andrew Wommack, and I just want to thank you for watching us on YouTube, and I want to encourage you to share. This will help us reach more people. Also, you can tag someone. We have people that listen and write and correspond with you, and we would encourage you to do that. We'd also like to see where everybody is watching this from all over the world. And then also we would like to ask you to partner with us. There's a spot right there on the screen that you can check, and you can designate a certain amount. But it costs a lot of money to do the things that we're doing, and we would encourage you to please join with us. I believe that you'd be blessed and you would be a big blessing to us.